Yes, yes, I am.
Getting your stash going.
Hmm.
Say, Bart, this one's for you. It's a Dutch Cavendish tobacco in an amphora pipe. I just finished restoring this one. It's a little tall billiard bowl, nicely rusticated or blasted, and
That's a
looks like a
beauty.
dream.
Yeah,
Really
that's a
cool.
beautiful pipe.
Really cool. Yeah, like I said, I can show you. I got an amphora pipe from a friend of mine, and it came from my birth year, which is why he gave it to me. Let's see if I can get some light on this. It was made in the year I was born, and then he gave it to me as a gift. And yeah, it smokes really well. And apparently they gave the amphora pipes away with like how should I explain this? Because this is a typical Dutch thing. In Holland, basically, if you buy something, 9 out of 10 times they will give you stamps or stuff like that that
Right.
help you save up for something. They use it to bind customers to a brand or a company. And in Holland, it's a really big thing. Like every supermarket will give you stamps to save something, towels, dishes, whatever, and it changes all the time. And it's just like a loyalty program. And Amphora did the same thing. They basically gave like little stamps with that tobacco, and if you had enough of them, you could trade them in for a pipe.
They used to have
Nice.
stamps, green stamps in America, S&H green stamps.
Mhm.
Sperry and Hutchison still exists, and they do loyalty and employment programs now, but the stamps are hard to come by. However, I used to work with an economist who smoked nothing but amphora, the brown pouch, and he had piles and piles of those little coupons. He gave me at one point a stack of them, which I couldn't decide which pipe shape to order, and I held on to the stack too long, and I don't think you can redeem them in the United States.
Yeah, and they didn't have that many different shapes. I think it were. I still got the original advert somewhere. If I find it, I will put it in the group because I did some research into this, and I think they had like 8 sizes, and all really nicely finished.
Yes,
He used to have cigarettes.
He had
Used to
very
also
few
carry.
pipes that he smoked to death, is what he did. This was 1975-ish or so.
Cigarette
Right.
pouches used to carry those kinds of redeemable coupons as well. They would stuff them
Yeah.
into the cellophane, and
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
remember
Camel
Camel
Bucks.
Cash?
yeah,
Yeah.
the television commercials for it would often have one guy giving a cigarette to another guy, and he goes, "Do you save the coupons or whatever?" And he goes, "How do you think I got my car?" Or
Yeah, actually, I still have a bunch of Camel Cash coupons at home from all times.
Back in the day, instead of giving out baseball cards with bubble gum, they used to give it out with tobacco.
Yeah, originally it was with the tobacco
This
and
is
with the
a,
cigarettes. Yeah.
This is a tobacco card of the famous pitcher Billy Serad.
any relation?
Yes, from the 1880s or so.
My goodness,
That's really cool.
that is really
That's
cool.
super cool.
That's a pretty old card you got.
Well, yes, I'm catching up with it. If you can imagine getting a baseball card with tobacco today, it's, you know.
I would enjoy it very
Getting
much.
tobacco is hard already without getting a card with it.
Yeah, now you're lucky to get tobacco with your tobacco.
Begrijp het, Jake, begrijp het.
That's certainly true. Well, hey fellas, I think I see a couple of new faces in, and I just want to welcome everybody to today's virtual pipe club. I'm doing my best to resist any kind of like organization, but I just try to keep it moving and keep it interesting. For those of you who haven't met yet, I'm David Dorian Ross. I'm the guy who just sort of started the seeds for this, and I'm just really grateful that it seems to be working. There's no real rules here except be grown up and don't be evil in a way. So, questions are encouraged. Obviously, conversations are great. I'm going to turn off everybody's microphone from my end to get the thing going. But be aware that you have the control over your own mic. If you aren't sure about how Zoom works too well, if you're on a laptop or desktop, just looking down at the bottom of the Zoom window, you'll see some audio and video controls, and you can just turn yours back on again anytime you want. If you're on a mobile device like a tablet or a phone or something, sometimes you just have to tap the screen of your mobile device and new controls will appear and you'll be able to find the audio control like that. So if you've got a question, don't be shy, but give everybody a turn kind of thing. You guys know what I'm talking about. So let me do that to start with. Oh, and by the way, if you're like stumped and you go, God, I can't find what he's talking about, I'm happy to turn your mics on and off for you. It's easy from my end, and I don't mind doing it. So I don't think I've got any business to address since we're not that really kind of club, but I'll talk about cool stuff like how well the swap thing is going. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But right now, I have to say it is my pleasure to introduce someone that I never would have met had it not been for this pipe club. And I'm really excited to have a chance to meet him and get to know him better and to hear from him. And that is William Serad. William, and I'm going to slave his picture so that everybody knows who he is. William is an author, a retired columnist for Pipes and Tobacco magazine, where he wrote a column for how many years, William? I better put you, oops, I got to put your microphone on here. Hold on.
Here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
After the first reviewer bailed, I became the tobacco reviewer for many years. So I wrote Trial by Fire. In fact, I named the column. And then I went away for a while because I didn't like the work product. And then I was writing another column called Pipefuls, which I stole from Christopher Morley. And recently somebody else has stolen that name for a podcast. But Christopher Morley, of course, we named the club in Philadelphia after him. And Bob Ranowski, fellow club member who lived around the corner from my mother, strangely enough, was a big Morley fan, and many of the blends that he did for Cornell and Deal had Morley allusions.
Mm. So so I didn't know about the Pipefuls column. Now I have another place to go and search out to see if I can read more of yours. I just want to give you a bit more of introduction here on the brief amount that I know about you. So the Trial by Fire columns were eventually compiled into a book length collection that apparently is out of print because I'm going crazy trying to find a copy everywhere.
It was out of print about 3 weeks after it was introduced.
But if I can find one, I'm going to get one. And I'll tell you guys why. I read a few of his columns that I could find online, and William is an extraordinarily great writer, especially in this genre. I could literally taste what he was writing about by virtue of his words. And so if you have a chance to read some of his columns, I think you'll be very pleased as well. And then on top of all that, William was at Cornell and Deal for enough time to create over 40 blends, or close to 40 blends.
Round about that number.
About 40 different blends. Are there any that we're still smoking today?
Yes, they still sell a number of them. Byzantium was mine. let's see, Black Duck, the frigate one. There's the Serenity series, which were all cubed burley. There's a series of all Virginias, one of which was Yorktown, that they continue to sell. There are a bunch of them. I'm not actually identified as the blender for any of them much, except for the Serenity series. Oh, there was the I worked with Rabbi Ira Stone from the club to develop a series that we called the Hebraica series, because he said that he couldn't find blends that were no Latakia. He didn't like Latakia, so he wanted Perique-based blends that had Orientals in them. So that's what that whole series was.
That's a kosher tobacco series, in other words.
It is, yes.
So that's just a Jewish joke for those of you for those goyim out there. So without any more chit chat from me, I'm going to open the floor to William and maybe just kind of kick it off and ask you to talk a little bit about tobacco tasting and reviewing, and we'll maybe just get the ball rolling that way.
Okay, well, everybody has their own tastes, and I just never had it in me to poo-poo things that other people liked, because tastes are entirely subjective. And let's face it, it's a biological kind of a product. So even the same thing, same product from the same manufacturer at different times will just be different. A different age on it will make it different. Different conditions will make it different. Different smoking conditions, different storage conditions. So writing reviews is kind of difficult in the sense that there were very few things that I just hated out of the box. And you have to judge things in their genre too. If something is an aromatic, you shouldn't treat it like it's a vapor or something and criticize it. So, I have my own particular tastes, but they're fairly broad, so that allowed me to do the reviews. I'm not a big aromatic fan, just because many of them are made with substandard leaf. Not all of them, however. Some of them are actually pretty good. So I don't poo-poo anybody's taste if they happen to like those kinds of things. I don't like propylene glycol or any of the glycerin kinds of additives. I find that they're not good to my palate. They goober it up terribly. I know they put all of that in order to keep the aromatic agents in the leaf, because many of them are alcohol based, and once the alcohol goes away, which is almost right away, I'm not talking about smoking, I'm talking about just when they put it on there, the alcohol. People talk about alcoholic beverages on tobacco, and really you're getting no alcohol. It's all evaporated by then. But that is the base for putting it on, and then the agent itself will evaporate eventually. So they put glycerin in of different sorts in order to keep the flavorings in. So I don't really like the glycerin. There are blends out there that are flavored that are not jellied like many of the aromatics are. So I read a lot of reviews. I obsessively read tobaccoreviews.com. I have never written a word there, but I read it, and I know what's in many of the blends, and what people are writing is completely wrong. Some of the people are completely right. So it is possible to fool people's palates because of the combination of things as well. Some people are just fabulously ignorant about the whole thing, and they shouldn't write opinions, in my opinion. But everybody has a right to do whatever the heck they feel like. It's taking them seriously that's another issue. And I really get tired of hearing all Virginias described as grassy and whatever. There's just a collection of words that you always see associated with particular varieties of leaf: nutty, burley, sweet, grassy Virginias, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't tell me anything, because there are so many gradations of those things. it doesn't evoke a taste to me at all. So whenever I wrote things, and I was roundly criticized by this. In fact, somebody called the Serenity series the Thesaurus series, and they thought that my prose was overblown, which maybe it is, but I was trying to evoke the experience of the blend. I was not trying to do a post-mortem on it based on its leaf content. So that was my approach to doing it. I tried to evoke what was being evoked in my taste buds.
I wonder if you could call up into your memory some of the tobacco blends or harvests that you remember that were notable, and perhaps how you would tell us about those today.
Well, I can tell you what experiences. I remember I went out at lunchtime from work. I used to work in Center City, Philadelphia, and I went to Holt's, which was there from 1898 or something or other. At the time, they had the largest humidified room in North America, which is dwarfed by the current generation of humidified rooms with cigars in them. But I went and I picked up, for the first time, a tin of Escudo, and I filled up a pipe and I lit it because you could do that in stores, and I walked outside, which you could do back then, and it was so incredibly delicious. I sat down on somebody's front steps in Center City, Philadelphia, a little south of the business district where there were houses, and I just couldn't believe it. I got back to work late because I smoked it all the way to the bottom, and it was just luscious. It was so good, I just couldn't even believe it. The current generation has not struck me as quite that powerfully delicious, but it's pretty darn good still, nonetheless. Maybe it has to do with age. I'm not sure. I don't, of other things. I remember there was a particular blend, and it was an aromatic, but as aromatics went, it was just dreadful. The topping, the flavorings, the leaf, it was just dreadful. I gave it a bad review, one of the few bad reviews I gave things, and then the manufacturer told the magazine that it stopped moving off the shelf entirely. So I thought, gee, nobody should take me that seriously. Nobody should listen to what I'm saying as if it were gospel, that kind of way. It's just ridiculous.
That is the power of the pen. Yes.
It is. And, there's so many choices. Perhaps that's what it is. I really sought to save people from bad products of their sort. I didn't really feel it was my business to tell people this is the top of the heap and this is what you should focus on. But I did feel an obligation to say, this is really not very good, avoid it.
I have a question for you, something that I've been curious about lately. When you selected, or when the column was going to do a review on a particular tobacco or blend, did you choose it yourself, or did the magazine assign it to you?
No, I was assigned virtually everything. In fact, a crate would show up full of stuff for me to try, and it would take, of course, months to go through it. The only time that I had a big rush and I actually picked them and bought it was, I think it was I was contacted in an emergency. And in fact, it was Craig Tarler who introduced me to Chuck Stanyon because they needed a reviewer quick, because the other guy just bailed, as I said, who used to do it. I think the first reviews, if I'm not mistaken, the first reviews I was doing were what we called over-the-counter blends. So they were codger burleys and those common kinds of things you could get in the drugstore. So I went out to the drugstore and I bought them all that I could find.
Gentlemen, if you have any questions for William, please go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask away. I've got a few more, but I tend to hog the microphone. I don't want to
Okay,
do that.
William, at first I want to thank you for all you wrote for Pipes and Tobaccos. I have every single issue of Pipes and Tobaccos magazine, always was looking forward to read your work. You and Todd Gage, The Trial by Fire, always love to read Chuck's editorials. I also have some experience in tobacco blending. Actually, one of my blends was sold 5 years ago as limited edition, Nat Sherman 85th anniversary. I made it in collaboration with Christopher McGrath, and Chris actually was featured in Pipes and Tobacco a few years ago. So once again, thank you for your wonderful work. And I totally agree that all tobacco reviews are totally subjective. Two people smoke exactly same tobacco in exactly same condition, and they will get different flavors, different tastes from the same tobacco. I write some reviews as well, mostly cigars, mostly on my Instagram. And but again, your taste in tobaccos is somewhat similar to mine. That's why it was extremely helpful to me. So I could learn what tobaccos I should try and what I probably should avoid. Thank you again.
You're welcome. And actually, that's a very good approach to it. There used to be a movie reviewer in Philadelphia, and if he hated the movie, I would love it. And if he loved the movie, then I hated it. So I knew whatever his review went, I would go the opposite way.
Yeah, there are some tobaccos which I wouldn't smoke if you pay me. It doesn't mean they bad tobaccos. They're just not right for me. They're not right for my taste.
That's absolutely true. It's just entirely subjective.
William, I don't know many, well, I don't know anybody. So this is maybe not a great preamble to my question, but I think it might be unique in a way to have someone who has two ends of the experience of being a blender and a reviewer at the same time, or having had both those experiences. Which came first, chicken or egg there?
I can tell you the whole process, actually.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Everybody, you come to a certain point where you start tinkering with your own blends. Barry Milroad in the Morley Club used to call it aftermarket reblending, because most people don't have the raw leaf components that can go in an unadulterated form, but you can certainly take other existing blends and reblend them. Well, I contacted Craig. I found him because he was an early adopter of the internet, and he was willing to make me small quantities of experimental blends just for me, for my own tastes, for me. He was so taken with some of these that he started to offer some of them to the rest of his customers. And it turned into quite a few. Some of them I made because he asked me to, like that Virginia series. He was going to the core meeting, and here on my desk, he won this cup at core, if you can see the core insignia on it, for that series of Virginia blends. And I did those for him at the time, but he didn't stove anything until then. So I was the one who got him stoving tobaccos. He initially went off to a restaurant supply company and got one of those steam cabinets, and it leaked so much steam he couldn't use it. And then he ended up getting a giant pot, like the size you cook missionaries in, and he was. So I don't know what Cornell and Deal are doing today for steaming stuff, but it's part of the stoving and steaming are part of different processes that he started doing because I asked him to for some of the blends. And then out of the blue, as I said, he connected me to Chuck Stanion, who had no idea what I wrote like. I didn't even write him having a great time, wish you were here postcard or anything. He took it on faith, or at least, you know, for one issue that I would fill in for, and then I ended up doing it for years. So that's how it happened.
Did you have a journalism background before you started writing the columns?
No, I make mathematical models of behavior. I was an econometrician originally, and I worked for a Nobel Prize winner, and then moved on to different kind of psychometric sorts of models for marketing. I've spent the last 25 years or so in the pharmaceutical industry.
Got it. Did you always, but your writing style is, I wouldn't say it's overblown at all. I would say it's evocative. And so I was curious about where your background was.
Writing reports, which are really turgid and boring. So you have to be inventive and creative, and, you know, especially being an economist, if you had to write a monthly report, says this went up, that went down, this stayed the same, this went up, that went down, this stayed the same. That's the same thing as saying, you know, grassy blah blah Virginias. It's just too boring to do more than once. It would make me crazy. So it's the writing is right. I have written a book just to see if I could do it. It's kind of a terrorist sort of a plot thing. It's only an ebook. It's available on Amazon.
I'm looking it up. Absolutely. Because, you know, I have to see if there's any pipe smoking in it. So
there is, of course. The protagonist is who saves the day is a pipe smoker. What else would he be?
All right. I want to make sure I open this up to other people. Yeah, Tim, just go ahead and hop in, buddy.
Yeah, William, thank you for being here. Very much enjoy reading your reviews. I found them to be very helpful. Could you speak a little bit about your process of, you know, evaluating a tobacco, and maybe something you could suggest for us other pipe smokers who, like, we get a new blend? What if we're trying to determine whether we like it or don't like it? Is there a process that we should go through, or that you could recommend?
Yes, I went through a process. I mean, some things immediately strike you as being good, and then it's a question of just optimizing it. So you can experiment with pack or indoors, outdoors, or other kinds of things. Some things you think have some hope of having characteristics that you appreciate, and in that case, then I start experimenting with different size pipes, different bowl shapes, you know, straight, bent, big, small, system, knot, all different kinds of things. So I work out essentially an experimental design is what it would be called in mathematics. I try make a grid of all the different characteristics, and you end up with I don't know, maybe a different pipe designs, and then you work your way through that to find out how the tobacco best works. And then there are things that you just can't get to work, and they're just bad, and you know, you don't buy it again, and you give it away. I've thrown away very little tobacco, so I have a basement full of tobacco. Some of the things I keep thinking someday I'll find the right pipe, but, you know, maybe not so. I also have big bundles of unblended leaf left over from Cornell and Deal days. So I actually have Syrian Latakia in my basement.
Wow. Well, thank you for that description. That's definitely helpful.
And William, I have a feeling that about a dozen guys are going to be visiting you at your house soon.
Yes. I also have an alarm system.
Excellent. I was want to do a follow-up maybe to Tim's question and your response to that about different pipes. Now, I'm a real just a hobbyist when it comes to smoking and understanding tobaccos and how they behave. Can you speak to like what happens when you put the same tobacco in different size and shapes pipes? Like, to somebody who doesn't really know, what would that be like? Does that make sense? Am I saying that well?
Yeah, well, like Mark Tinsky, for instance, the pipe maker, who used to be a Pennsylvanian, is of the opinion that straight-walled pipes are best for flakes. So he likes to smoke flakes in pots, which have straight walls to them. If you look at something like this is a Kirsten. All the Kirsten bowls are actually beveled to the pattern that the way it burns down in them. You know, tobacco doesn't burn straight typically, it burns down in a conical kind of way. And every Kirsten has a conical kind of a bore to it to facilitate a complete burn all the way down. Kirstens also have that big air chamber, so they change the taste of things. These are dreadful to me, they're dreadful for Virginia flakes. They're just awful. But for other stuff, like this one I use with Lake District flakes, and some things which didn't appeal to me at all work like gangbusters in this. All of those weird Lake District flavorings that they use, and it just tastes tremendous in a Kirsten. It has to do also with absorbing tar into the walls. You know, people talk about break-in, and that's, you know, why some pipes are oil processed. They boil them in oil to remove anything. They're all boiled in water to begin with. All the briar is boiled in water to remove sap and whatnot, but then some do it in oil again, still yet again a further time to remove all of that, because that's where bitterness comes from. The reality in break-in is too, is the tar goes into the walls of the pipe to replace whatever, and it's something that's much more noticeable in things other than briar. Like if you had a cherry wood pipe, or I had a pipe made out of Ubinga or rosewood or something, and it actually had these little dots form on it where the grain went through, and the little dots were tar. You could pop them off with your finger after it cooled, because it was pulling the tar actually through the wall. I detest breaking in corncob pipes because they taste awful and I'm allergic to corn. But when they're broken in, they're really great smokers. They're just, they're light. They don't affect, they're very neutral to the flavor after it's broken in. So, you know, the shape of the bowl, also system pipes. I have a couple of, I don't know if you've ever seen these straight Petersons, but they have a rod in them because it's still a system pipe, a straight system. I don't know, have you ever seen these? Am I talking about something people are not familiar with? If you pull it apart, there's a rod that goes into it. It's straight. It means that the bowl is much shorter, but if you want to try things and you want some of the adulterations to go out of them, they're terrific for that. The bowl is quite small because there's that air chamber under it, and then the metal rod that goes through. I can go get one if somebody wants to see it.
Yeah, I think we'd love to see it. But before you go,
before I
go, or when you get back, there's a question. I'm monitoring the chat here. A few of the guys are not familiar with what stoving is, and so they were like, "Could we talk about that, or should I?" Yeah.
I'll get the pipe.
Yeah. This gentleman, this is another perfectly good way of asking questions. If you can't break in, or if you just want to type it into the chat there, one of us will surely ask a question. Bart and Stephen and I, you know, kind of are happy to sort of take the lead for you if you want us to, and but don't be shy. Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with Peterson system pipes, where all the funk goes into it's bent and the funk goes into a little chamber that's drilled here off of it. This is a straight system pipe, and it has a metal rod that's bored poured through a metal pipe that goes from the stem. And the inside here where it fits, it's actually very large, and it performs a similar function as the straight one. In order to do that, you have to make the chamber very short. Does not go in very as far as you would guess, given the size of the thing. So that's how they made this. I find them extremely useful for taste testing things that are obstreperous or don't want to taste the way they're supposed to taste. Stoving is a lot of processes that can go on to leaf after it's cured. You know, there are air cured leaf kinds of things, which are the burleys. In India, they sun cure some things. They smoke some of it as well. Here, the dark fired leaf is actually a burley kind of leaf, and family has their own secret way of smoking that, which is how they smoke Latakia as well, but use more exotic kinds of things. Here, you know, some people use hardwood knots to smoke it for dark fired leaf. Some people use other stuff, but it all depends. The other processes are, of course, to press it and age it. It's also they use the gum arabica to hold the pressings together, unless it's meant to fall apart. If it's meant to fall apart, then they just squash it under, you know, 38 to 40 tons of pressure, and then it has to sit and presses for a while, even if it has the gum to hold it together. So a lot of flakes have gum in them in order to hold the flake together. Stoving happen like black Cavendish for American style black Cavendish is made from burley because it will hold all of the toppings and flavorings they put in. And they will put it in a large, it's a room-sized place, and then they steam the heck out of it, and the leaf turns black, and essentially it's cooked. In order to make it sweet, they will spray or dip it in sugar water before that process goes on, and then that turns black, and you get American style black Cavendish. There are enough sugars in Virginias that if you heat them up and cook them, they turn black, and that's the British style, where they had laws about adulterating tobacco, so they couldn't put a lot of stuff on them and, you know, flavor them in that same kind of way as the American sorts are. So another way to do it is with the heat press. The original press, I think the name was Ciboulette originally for just pressing the leaf, but the heated presses are what the British did. They actually put them in the press. The press is heated up itself, that's holding the things together, and it cooks the block. So Samuel Gawith and Hogarth both have these kinds of things. And recently with the HH line of flakes from MacBaron, those are the British style heated presses that they're using for those. So you can use steam to do it. You can use heated pressure presses in order to do it. There are a number of ways to do it. When I was experimenting by myself, I used a rice cooker because I didn't, you know, have a room in my house I wanted to dedicate to steaming tobacco. Does that answer the question, or have I gone off into the nether world?
No, that sounds like you answered the question. But fellas, if you have a follow-up, just go ahead and Glenn's giving me a big thumbs up there. That's awesome. Yeah, to me, I'm more familiar with tea and how tea is processed. There's a lot of similarities there in the curing process of tea. And so I kind of surmised that what you're describing as stoving was the same as to how some of the different oolong teas are made. And it's sort of like, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe add the proper way of describing this, but there is a certain kind of, I don't know if aging is the right term here, but a certain kind of timeline along which if you stop the stoving process, you'll get a different kind of product.
Yes, that's absolutely the case.
Yeah. So that's kind of a, that falls into Dimitri's line of work there. He's our organic chemist.
Well, by education, not by profession. But yes, that tea analogy is really good. White tea or green tea, that's equivalent of bright Virginia, like air cured. Fermentation stops early, so leaf stays pretty light. And if you keep fermenting it, you get oolong tea, or it goes to like red and dark Virginias. And if you keep fermenting it even more, you get black tea. So it depending on time of fermentation and temperature and overall conditions of processing. Oh, by the way, we have newcomer, another member of New York Pipe Club, Patrick Grant. He joined us a few minutes ago.
Welcome, Patrick. Nice to have you here. William, we had one of our guys, Rob asks, how practical would it be to grow and flavor your own tobacco now that there are so many restrictions and taxes and possible legislative action that would restrict that, but that would give you a good end result?
Well, give you a good end result. That's the tricky part.
That's the tricky part, eh?
You can certainly buy tobacco seeds and grow it yourself. I knew people that that were growing Tobaccaria rustica, the stuff that Mac Barron just used in their latest offering, largely because it has pretty flowers. It has, you know, little white flowers that's attractive looking just as a plant. The tobacco as a crop, you know, sucks everything out of the ground. It really is a little different than most other kinds of cash crops in the sense that it just depletes itself fabulously. It occurred to me, you know, that something were worthwhile doing, it would be trying to grow the Oriental varietals that are harder to come by. But I don't know how they would grow in South Jersey. You know, this is tomato country here and apple and peach trees. So I don't know about tobacco necessarily. If I were to pick something to do, it would be the Orientals, and you still have to cure it then. So if you're going to just air cure it like Burley, flue cure it, then you need a building with a air blowing through it at a warmish temperature. And then if you're going to try to make something like, you need essentially a smokehouse if you're going to make Latakia or dark fired or something along those lines. So you can do hams and tobacco. There's a guy in the Barcelona Pipe Club. I don't know, some of you might know him, Tony. He's a lawyer, but he has a pork recipe that he makes with Latakia.
Tony Pascual.
Yes.
I'm from Spain, so I know him well. And yes, he made that. And actually, Samuel Gawith made a version of his, I don't know how to call it, stew or barbecue thing into a pipe one time.
Well, a lot of wires crossing there. Are you in Spain? I don't see many pictures up at the moment.
Sorry, my bad. I'm originally from Spain, but I live in Kentucky. But yeah, I met him so many times before. He just came to Madrid, or we used to have pipe smoking contests in Barcelona. There is about 5 or 6 different groups and teams.
Yes, he was at the very first internationally sanctioned pipe smoking competition was in Philadelphia, sponsored by the Morley Club. I still have a tamper from our Japanese friends who were there. It's a dowel actually, but it's a sugi dowel. And Tony was sitting at my table, and he does this total psych out thing. He got up, put the pipe down, went to the bathroom, came back and picked it up, and it was still going. It totally demoralized everybody else that he could walk away from it. And I believe he won the contest. So he's very adept. I believe it or not, I also have an undergraduate degree in Spanish literature. And at one of the Chicago shows, the president of the Pipe Club of France, who doesn't speak any other language, was speaking to Tony, who speaks French, English, and Spanish, about trying to get, and Tony's English is not very good, but he was trying to get articles from Pipes and Tobacco to exchange articles, cross-exchange articles between the publication, the magazine from the Pipe Club of France, and Pipes and Tobacco. So it was one of those strange whisper down the lane things where the French guy would say to Tony, blah, blah, blah in French, and then Tony would say it to me in Spanish, and then I translated it from Spanish, which my Spanish was better than to Chuck Stanion. And we went back and forth up and down the line about this thing. And when they got to being a lawyer, he said something or other about an ensayo, which to me was an essay and had some legal meaning. And then I got stumped at that point because I didn't know what he was asking for to exchange these articles.
I know he was in Chicago last year too, until Monday even on the convention. And yes, most of the ones he comes to, he's smoking over 2.5 hours, 3 hours easily, no problem.
It's amazing.
He has a good, like, I'm gonna say 8-10 pages long article exactly about how to smoke in contest with good tips about everything.
Well, I would believe all of it.
Unfortunately, I don't know if you guys know, but he got sick, so he pretty much doesn't smoke much anymore.
No, I didn't know that. The other bad news I just had was that Craig Tarler's wife, Patty Tarler, passed away.
Right. Yeah.
This week, which was a surprise. I was actually rooting around for her phone number to give her a call, and was surprised that she had passed away. So I hadn't talked to the family in a while.
I know Bart has brought up a number of times about the sort of the generational change in pipe smokers. But I don't want to speak for him. Bart, why don't you chat about that a little bit, my friend? You're gonna have to do your own.
Yeah,
microphone.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually already several questions on my mind, DDR, so thanks. The first was, and I asked this to pretty much everyone, that I see pipe smoking. It's very weird to say it here because there's not that many old guys here, but I see pipe smoking as something my grandfather would do, and I see very little young people, let's say under the age of 30 or 35, I don't know, something like that, jumping into this hobby. And then if I look at this room, there's quite a few of those, and I'm just wondering how you, as a veteran pipe smoker, see the future of pipe smoking and the way the new generation is picking it up.
When I started, it was actually dying out, to be honest. There weren't a lot of carvers. It was just kind of fading away in some respects. And then for some reason, it was sort of resuscitated. There were actually 2 runs at forming a club in Philadelphia. The first one petered out immediately. And the club just had its, I think, 25th anniversary, something like that. I don't remember how many years. Just some months ago. And if you look at the attendees and the membership, you have the old codger bunch of people, and then you have this whole other tier of younger people, and nobody in between. So those were the dead years, it seems to me. It's a pretty vigorous organization now, which again is shocking, given the fact that the founders are all codgers. But there's a whole new generation of guys there. We had a couple of ladies too. One of whom was a professor from Penn and came with her husband, and the other of whom was a lady whose husband was one of the founders who passed away, and then she started smoking his pipes and came to the meetings. So it's still not exactly a female-oriented hobby, but there was some variation in it that probably didn't exist at all when I started.
Okay, gentlemen, unfortunately, I have to leave now. Well, it's a great pleasure hanging out with you, William. Thank you again for joining us. And I have another event starting in a couple of minutes, but I'll see you all next week. Bye.
Have a great
Thanks,
night,
Dimitri.
Dimitri.
I don't know what the tastes are of younger smokers either. I'd be interested in like survey information on that.
To be honest, I couldn't tell you because I've been smoking for like 4 months. So the only pipe smokers I've met are the people here. So yeah, it's not something I can help you with, but I would be interested too, seeing in what they smoke, because all the veteran smokers smoke all the really heavy, smoky, leathery stuff, and I'm not quite
We've
there
convinced
yet.
Bart that he has to smoke Smoker's Delight in a blue pouch.
I think Steven is sending me something in a blue pouch. I have another question, actually, now that I was talking anyway. To give you a bit of background, and I haven't talked about this before, but I used to be a trainer for Nespresso, the coffee brand. And one of the things I would try and teach people is taste the difference between certain types of coffee, and not just different beans or different regions, but really different blends. And when I really got into this, I noticed that I started tasting really minute aspects of flavors and things you wouldn't expect. So I would eat something that had like the tiniest bit of aniseed in it, and I would say immediately, this is aniseed. And then my wife would take the package and it's like 0.02% aniseed, something super, super weird like that. And I could do this with a lot of things that it just didn't even appear to me that this was weird, that you're so in touch with flavor. Do you have this also where you notice that there's in other aspects of your life and on other things that you're tasting, that it just changes the way you look at things or changes the way you interact with what you taste, other than smoking?
I don't know. It's my nature is to obsessively learn about things if I'm interested in them. So one of the things about pipe smoking was to learn everything that I could when I started about pipes and tobaccos. I don't think I have average level interests in tobacco leaf itself along the way. So other things that I do, I kind of do obsessively. I'm an amateur cellist, and I obsess about the way I play, even though I don't do it for a living. I hate mediocrity. So if I'm going to do something, then I hurl myself at it. And the thing I tell people about pipes too is that there is actually a technique that's involved. You need to become adept at working the thing to get the best results out of it. It's not like I think there's far less technique with cigar smoking. It's not a technique oriented kind of a thing, but in the case of pipes, you need to operate the instrument well. You need to have a good instrument, and the cost of pipes seems to me to be unrelated to the performance of them in most cases. I've had some awful expensive pipes, and I've had some really good smoking cheap pipes. So it's all depends upon how that particular one comes out. So tastes of things. I have noticed, for instance, additives in tobaccos at times I do find are used in tea. And I never would have thought about them being in tea or otherwise if I hadn't known about them in pipe tobaccos. And vice versa. There's some food items that show up in pipe tobaccos that you wouldn't assume were there. I mean, the biggest consumer of licorice in the world is the tobacco industry, because licorice is used as a flavor enhancer a lot. so often, and people say I hate licorice, but it's used very delicately and in low quantity in the interest of enhancing the natural tobacco flavor. Tobacco by itself, burleys have a chocolate kind of flavor without chocolate being added, without cocoa. It's the case that some things that used to be used commonly as enhancers are no longer used because they're not allowed to be used in foodstuffs either. I'm drawing a blank here on the coumarin is used. There's actually a lot of coumarin in deer's tongue, naturally occurring. Coumadin is the drug warfarin, and it's also the rat poisoning. But coumarin is the flavoring, and it used to be used in Maivine. It's still used in German Maivine as part of the flavoring. It used to be used in Fouget. I think they're called kinds of perfumes and aftershaves, and all of that is now illegal in the EU. I don't know how like Gawith and Hogarth gets away with using some of these things. And here in the United States, you'll still find tobaccos with deer tongue in it, even though they have a fairly sizable amount of that. So you'll find that smell or that taste showing up. It tastes at times like berries almost. There's a lot of it in raspberries. It's naturally occurring as well. So you'll taste it in berries. You'll smell it in different aftershaves and things. And yet it used to be a phenomenally common tobacco additive. Molasses is also used very commonly for burleys, and most people don't even know it.
Thanks.
Is the source of the root beer flavor that is no longer used, or am I thinking of a different herb?
Sarsaparilla. Sarsaparilla used to be in Hires root beer, but they changed the formula because of it.
Yeah, the original herb that was used for root beer that used to give it that really great root beer flavor, they found, is toxic, like lead paint, and so they had to ban it. And now the reason why root beer no longer tastes like root beer is because they're trying to replace it with something else.
And well, strangely enough, they've come up with synthetic coumarin now. So the flavor has returned, but it's a synthetic thing. It's interesting that in the bygone years of tobacco companies, all the flavorings used to be made there in like in a back room. I was in the House of Windsor's closet. It was like the ceiling was crooked because steps went up over part of it, and there was a wall full of all these little bottles, including liquor bottles. I mean, actual, bottles of particular varieties of liquor that they would use. And all of that kind of do-it-yourselfy things, like the flavorings that are in Middleton blends, the famous Middleton ones that they still sell, the few that they still sell, like Prince Albert and whatchamacallit, the one with the beigey color with the house on the thing.
Carter Hall.
What?
Carter Hall.
Carter Hall, right. That facility and building is still there. So whatever they make, they're still making. And people who make knockoffs of it are not using that stuff. There are in the entire world something like 7 or 8 flavoring companies. So Cornell and Deal used to get many of their flavorings from the same place that Lifesavers did. A lot of the places that so if you find flavors that are similar because they come from the same flavoring company, then they may be natural or they may be artificial, but in the entire world, there are only that many companies that make flavorings. So, if you find similar tastes between tobacco and a bunch of other foodstuffs, that's why. And in ye olden days, they used to literally whip the stuff up in the back room.
Maybe another one. That's the last one I'll do. What's your favorite tobacco after tasting the many, 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 many tobaccos you have?
It unfortunately is not made anymore. I have two actually. One of them is, can you see this, or have I gone dead on you?
No, I
You
can
just
see
have
it.
to lift it up a little higher. There we go.
Yeah, that's perfect.
This is one of them. It's number 24 Virginia from McClellan, and you know there was a point to getting to this point of this one, and the other one. Is number 27. And I was also fond of 20 Flake, Blake and East 20 Flake, but so they were all McClellan products, though I have to say the Solani, what's the number? 301, 601, I forget. There's a tin on the other side of the room, but I've already left the left the conversation enough that I'll stay here this time. For its sort, it's exceptionally good. It seems perfectly balanced to me. And I point people in the direction if they want to taste pure things, unadulterated with stuff at all, just to get an idea of what the component is. The Daughters and Ryan two-timer. If you want to taste what burley tastes like, just straight burley. This is toasted twice, but it kind of drives out any unpleasantness from it. This is what burley tastes like. Also, any of the Rimbaud, this is AB that has a little Latakia in it, but the other two have just Perique in small quantities. I can recommend those to get an idea of what just that tastes like, just that alone.
Guys, I'm curious to see, and maybe we can post this as answers on our group page, but that might be something that we could coordinate to grab a couple of tins of something like that and then send it out to, I probably couldn't do it to 150 people, but like we got 20 guys here today, that could be really doable. We could send out some samples of those, yeah, except for the guys in South Africa, David, I'm sorry. You're like, I don't want to get you arrested, brother. And I don't want them coming to my house either. But, what I mean, we could send out some samples of some of those straightforward. That'd be really interesting to talk about that, those straightforward tobaccos. Well, guys, any other questions for William? We have this wonderful resource here, and I don't feel like we've tapped into, his expertise. I'll tell you what. Here's a question for you. Maybe this will spark something. Amongst the most recent tobaccos that you might have tried, how would you write about them? Like, give us a sample of your writing, reviewing, sort of evaluative style of something that you've recently tried.
Okay, my recent trials have been kind of strange in that here are the two things that I was doing. I went back to some of my own old blends that the things that I made that were actually for my taste, not to fill in a line for C&D, but actually to my taste, were the series of Syrian Latakia blends for Cornell and Deal. Unfortunately, you cannot buy those, and they don't make them anymore. I have them, and I pulled them out just to try them to see how well they fared. it's interesting because Syrian Latakia fades over time. You know, it's with some rapidity, and you're left with more of an Oriental kind of effect. It's like you're in a I don't know, steamy Turkish bath or something compared to the way the flavors were originally. It's everything becomes pastel and gauzy. It's like looking at the past through a haze. And that's the way they taste now because they haven't aged the way a Virginia might get better and better. These have just become ghosts of themselves over time. It's an interesting effect. The flip side is I was terribly interested in Russ Wallett's. He comes to the club meeting a few times. You know, he's a member of the club up in Bethlehem where where he works and lives. I was interested in these knockoffs of all these old blends that they make. So I got some of these Hearth and Home series called the Midtown series. So they have Prince Andrew, that's supposed to be like Prince Albert, and they have Chatham Manor, that's supposed to be like the one I just forgot again. This is supposed to be Middleton Cherry, it's called Cherry, and Sweet Cask, which is supposed to be Sugar Barrel. And I have these in my, you know, the two of them are still made, so you can make an A-B comparison to them if you wanted to do that. Sweet Cask is not, but I happen to have a full new container of it. Not new, it's a full old container of it. And Walnut, they make a knockoff of Walnut too, and I have a full one of those. I have extensive collections of tobacco, as you might imagine. And I was wondering how these compared. Well, the leaf quality is so much better than the stuff that you find in the current generation of Middleton or otherwise. It's very hard to make a comparison because it's not apples to apples. It's not. I don't know, the kind of things that you'd get of that ilk now if you just went to Walmart and you picked up the little box with the soft pouch inside of Prince Albert. You can put it in the pipe. It's not offensive. It's not a great experience kind of thing. You turn off your head and you puff and you're doing something else. It's not something you pay attention to. And it's because the leaf is not the be all end all of quality that you might expect. You know, the buying process that they could no longer carry out at our friends at McClellan was one of the reasons they went out of business. The auctions and the way of buying it, they would go and actually taste the bales before they were fully aged and cured. They used to call it the sacrifice of the tongue or something. I forget, like they used to go get tongue bite trying all of this tobacco because they were that particular about buying it. That's not how they buy it at Middleton or one of the big places. They just buy, you know, send me X number of bales of whatever it is. So, but the quality of this, the leaf itself was just so different. It was like a whole different thing. Then there's the question of what it is that they put on it, you know, the toppings to give it flavor. So as it happened, cherry was like, just tastes like burley to me. I don't taste any cherry. They used to use actual real cherry juice for some manufacturers. I don't know what Middleton did. And they use, you know, like Lifesaver cherry on a lot of the other cherry blends that are out there. However, the Prince Andrew was shocking to me because the leaf quality was so much higher. It's still kind of sooty burley by the time you get down to the bottom of it, but the aroma, the general taste and experience, smoked really slowly. It was just a whole other thing. And Sweet Cask similarly is you know, it's a cube burley base kind of a thing with a little Virginia thrown in, but it's sweetened. And the original one, I would swear to you, has coconut on it as well, coconut oil. This one does not have anything like that at all. And so it's very different to me. Most things that are copies, people call them copies, really bear no resemblance to the original. I have any number of of examples because I have the originals, and if you try them, you'll find that the new thing, because of what's put on them, it just bears no resemblance. So these things are of just a whole order of magnitude over the things that they're supposed to be copying. I will say too, the ones that they put out to replace the John Cotton line are really exceptional, and he did this in part off of actual, well, chemical testing in some cases to find out what kind of additives were put on to reproduce those as accurately as possible. I now see EOS webcam utility on my screen.
Well, William, what would you say to someone who's chasing a flavor? So I live in Canada, and there was a Canadian chain of tobacco stores called Sheffield and Sons, and they had a tobacco called Birkenhead Rich. This is going back to the late 80s, early 90s. And there was a flavor in that the smell and the flavor was very reminiscent of something that I had smelled that my dad had smoked, 30 years before that. I found a tobacco called Black Cordial, and it's either by Lane or by the other big tobacco company. I can't remember what they're called now. The one that does Multi Dolce. But it has a semblance of it. Sutliff, thank you. It has a semblance of the flavor and smell, but there's not enough of it. It's a great tobacco, but there's not enough of it in it. And I was looking to get something with more in it. Sheffield Sons is long since out of business now. So just wondered what advice you could give for trying to identify what the flavor would be.
So you don't have a sample?
I don't have a sample of the original tobacco anymore, no.
If it is a Sutliff blend, then I would actually write to Russ Willett and mention this to him. He's, he worked at tobacconists before he went to work for a manufacturer, and his reproduction of Cotton's Smyrna, I have some 40-year-old Smyrna, of course it's very aged, but I did an A-B comparison, and they are the closest copy of anything I've ever tried before.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, what did you say?
No, I just said thank you very much. That's a great idea. I'll reach out to him.
He's a very nice guy, and if he can tell you what it is, a lot of places don't want you to know. They have to kill you if they tell you. But I'm sure if it were a particular element in it, he would have some idea.
What was the name of the tobacco you're looking for?
The original tobacco was called Birkenhead Rich from Sheffield and Sons. There's a little hint of the flavor and smell I get every once in a while out of Black Cordial, and that was a Sutliff. So thanks for whoever pointed that out.
Fellas, I'm still here, but my camera turned off for a bit, so you'll have to carry on without me for a minute. Stephen, take over.
Okay. William, I actually have two questions for you. One really is more of a question around just, you talked a little bit earlier around just like technique and, learning your pipe and we talk a lot about, keeping it cool. Was there anything that for you clicked or you can recommend? I feel like I've gotten some great tips over the last couple of meetings on keeping cool, and, I'm trying to, I have one pipe right now that I just can't get to stay cool. Any advice from that perspective?
I'm not sure. I had just to give you an example, I had a Dunhill. It was a fine pipe, but I kind of punched a hole through the bit, and I had it replaced not by Dunhill, but with a kind of mass manufactured bit, and it turned into one of my hottest smoking pipes. I couldn't believe that it lasted up so bad, and I was going to send it off to an actual artisan pipe maker to have it fixed. But strange things have an effect on that. The humidity level of the tobacco too. I find that many people try to smoke it too wet, and as a consequence, you puff much harder, and then you get burned by steam. Since steam, is past the boiling point, or it wouldn't have changed state into steam. So drier is actually better, drier than many people think. That's really my best suggestions. The pipe by pipe, it's really an individual kind of a thing. You can get mass manufactured pipes, and the three of them will look exactly the same, and they won't smoke the same.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Do you have an everyday smoke?
No.
No. No, it's cool. That's good.
I'm just totally fickle.
Excellent.
I think too much about it, and then root around and see what I can find, and whatever. It's I don't. It's just, and it's kind of seasonal too. I tend to move away from Latakia in the summertime, and Virginia Perique or flakes are good any time of the year.
Awesome.
I have these wild urges at times too, and those queerly antique kinds of things from Europe become appealing, that don't appeal to many people. Like Samuel Gowith's Whatchamacgrousemore. I can't see it from here, but somebody said it was like smoking your grandmother's underwear or something like that, because of the additives to it. But and then there's the one from nuts. It's on the other side of the room again. I have to get up to go get it, but it's one of those things that doesn't appeal to people, but it's one of those weird mood kinds of things for me that it's just the right note when it's time for it. It's making me want to go get it now.
I'm reminded I had a client, a student once, who was a chocolate reviewer. She was a chocolate expert, and she used to be sent pounds and pounds of chocolate to test and review. And she said she had, shelves and shelves of chocolate from all different kinds of boutique chocolatiers on up to Mars and, a company and Hershey's and whatnot. And she was like, I could never choose a chocolate. It's just too many. I could not have a favorite. So, there's a point to the story, and that is that she would show up where I was working. I was working at a hotel at that time, and with a giant garbage bag full of chocolate. And all of the other staffers that I worked with would always ask me, when's the chocolate lady coming again? So perhaps we can talk William into showing up with a bag full of tobaccos for us. Just saying, just in case.
I think that's a great idea.
Germain's plum cake. It's it's very old-fashioned. It's very strange, and yet when it's time for it, it's exactly the right thing. And another blast from the past. Again, it's Daughters and Ryan, but it's London Dock, which used to be made by Middleton, who quit. And it's unusual because it's Virginia's, I think, some burley, Orientals, Turkish leaf of some sort, and Perique, and they put it says rum, cherry, and vanilla, but it might have rum originally, but it definitely has coumarin in it. It's very noticeable, and it used to have rose extract, but people apparently disliked the rose component, so they didn't make it. But this was a remarkably accurate knockoff of Middleton's London Dock to me. And again, it's weird enough that every once in a while it's a thing that appeals to me. It's too weird to smoke all the time.
I got another question. Nothing related, mostly in regards of Orientals, because I've been smoking 20 plus years, and I try a lot of all blends in Europe where when they put an Oriental, they told you which one it was, if it was Genis or Macedonian or Bashma, even though it's a combination of four, etc. Nowadays, they try to hide what Oriental is on the blend most of the time. And here on the other side that now they grab Izmir, Drama, and Macedonian, put it together and put it on a blend. Is that right? What's it?
Yes, when you bought, if they said Turkish tobaccos here in the United States for years, it was just a melange of different Orientals that they would smush together, and there was no particular thing. It's only in recent years that you were able to buy. They were poor quality in the past, but you can actually buy particular varietals. So you could get Drama or Yenaji or the. I know for years people were trying to get Smyrna, and they couldn't, and now they can apparently get it at fine quality. So there was that whole series that McClellan released that they were meant to highlight the characteristics of the particular Oriental varietal, since they could get them, and they were of high enough quality that McClellan would do it. But you're right; they just made a big montage out of a bunch of different ones, and I have a big bag in my basement that's marked Turkish. It's just a whole bunch of different things, and that's the way you buy it because they didn't differentiate the individual leaf types. It's unfortunate. It's another reason why some of the attempts at reproducing old blends are failures because they don't have the right varietals that are involved.
Thank you. I mean, I normally buy. I'm a big love of these ones that the Orientals make to make my own ones. And I have almost everything. Like mostly Bashma is the one that I like a lot. They made, and they have a couple of Macedonians, other Orientals. If you smoke them by itself, you can notice and appreciate the difference, but I don't think it's nothing close to the McClellans. Like the Drama and the Samsung were totally different. So those were well made at the time.
They they were very particular about the leaf, as I said. They would go and try it all at the auctions. So I asked them quite a while ago when they still only had the brown and green tins and whatnot about getting varietals for doing blends, and they said we can get them, but they're just poor quality, so we won't make anything with them.
I mean, I gotta say that the tobacco that mostly surprised me within the next, I'm gonna say the last 3-5 years, it was the Sunbird from Cornell and Deal, where they have the combination of Bashma and Izmir, and that was a really, really good one that you can appreciate. Or when they make the Embarcadero, you can notice that Izmir is totally different than other blends that only has Izmir as well. So
yeah, I have some of their Izmir in my basement too. I used for something, I don't remember what, but yeah, I don't know what happened in the market that they were able to get higher quality varietals, but it certainly changed the industry quite a bit here in the United States, anyway.
For example,
sorry. No.
Just 1 second. Sorry, David. One of the good things, and you mentioned earlier, because I was going to mention too, Smyrna, it was amazing. The one when Rasulet used to make it, not now. I think it's made by Sudley for all these guys, but you can notice the big difference on that blend particularly.
William, here's a question I have been trying to ask all of our guest speakers. So as a expert in the field, and I think we all are really appreciating your expertise right now. Like you've taught me a bunch of stuff already, but here you have sort of a focus group, don't you? With the guys in the Pipe Club many of us really excited about learning more and whatnot. What questions would you ask of us? What, you've got somebody like Bart, who's only been smoking pipes for, less than 6 months, to some others who have been smoking for 20 years or whatever. Like, it's a pretty good cross section of the current pipe smoking community. What are your curiosities?
My biggest curiosity is what you would be smoking, actually. For years, all of those over-the-counter codger, burley kind of things were terrible. The leaf that was going into them was just awful. And then when they were taken over by Scandinavian Tobacco Group, the quality went exactly in the opposite direction. Many of them are delicious again, and just because of the underlying leaf. There were things that I tried and just dismissed years ago because they were just so terrible. And there was a whole chemical component to some of them too. You'd have to, if you bought it, you'd have to leave it open for 2 weeks to drive off the chemical effluvia that went with it. But now many of these old stinkers are now actually tasting pretty good. Things that I never would have thought about. I know somebody who's smoking half and half now, and Granger and Velvet, all those things have all been taken over by Scandinavian Tobacco Group, and they're putting respectable ingredients in them. So what are people smoking, and would they just dismiss those old codger things out of hand?
I can tell you what I'm smoking, because I just fell in love well, not the first time, but definitely with it, tobacco in this way. I haven't had it before. I'm smoking the McBaron Navy Flake. And even though I don't really like aromatics all that much, this stuff is amazing. It really hit the spot.
Yeah. Well, here it is. Here it is, right on top of my pile.
Well, you enjoy it, because like I said, I've tried, I think, not that many, but 12 or 13 tobaccos so far. And this is by far my favorite. It's really nice.
It is, in fact, really nice. I've come back to it after a rest. This is what Mark Tinsky smokes while he's bass fishing in Montana now, or wherever the heck he lives. If anything, it's improved over the years. I'm really very, very impressed with how it's held up after all this time. Also, one of their, they call it Golden Extra in the United States, one of my longtime burley favorites. They also re-released London blend, which they stopped making. They were only selling it in Germany and the United States at one point, and then they quit for a while, and they just had a run of, so I bought a bunch of tins to put away. It didn't fit with their new MO of no additives and British kinds of processes and things. So that's why they stopped making it. But an interesting choice.
It's interesting how your tastes change over the years. I started smoking a pipe in 1992. My father smoked Amphora regular blend, the brown package, for pretty much the entire time he smoked a pipe, I think. And I tried it and I hated it. And I thought it was the most god awful thing I'd ever tasted. And I went to aromatics, and then I found Latakia, and I started smoking a good quality Latakia blend, got into Virginias. And now that I'm looking for some tolerance from my family to smoke closer to them, I'm back to some good quality aromatics again. So
it's funny. I think everybody goes through a similar kind of thing. When I started, I actually was given by the tobacconist. I went into a tobacco shop. Philadelphia Tobacconist is where I went, and I bought a calabash of all things, and I asked him to recommend something, and he gave me an American. I call it an American blend, but it had, it was I call American blends essentially a British blend with burley in it, and it was their biggest seller, and that's where I started. But then I went off to aromatics, which ultimately I think were not satisfying. And then I discovered Latakia, and then I went to the opposite extreme. There used to be a blend called Yaka Ova, which was the heaviest blend I've ever seen to this day. And you were allowed to smoke in restaurants, and I was smoking it on the way out. People were falling over behind me. Their chairs were tipping over from the smell of it. And then I discovered Virginias and Virginia Periques, and then that's kind of where I was for a long time. And now I'm back to everything imaginable. So you know, there's a big circle in the field.
Some of you know I just did my very first tobacco review I've ever done, because I'm embarrassed to do a review, but I reviewed the new HH Rustica from McBaron, and instead of being this big nicotine bomb that I had anticipated, it's actually, I think, immediately one of my favorites. The flavor is really, I'm trying to be something more suggestive than just say it's nice. It's pleasant. It's savory. But
it has a bunch of other stuff to cut back the Rustica component. If you had Rustica alone, it's a stiff thing. I don't know whether you've had any of the G&H ropes.
Not yet.
Well, the brown ones, the ones that are not cooked, are those will leave you drooling in a heap. And personally, when I tried 1792, I was supposed to write a review of it, and I was driving, had an hour and a half drive to work, and I was driving, I had to pull over to vomit. It was, you know, I was fortunately back roads and not a highway, and I had to pull over, open the door, and puke.
And certainly that's what we're all looking for in a pipe tobacco.
I have to share this little story, guys, because it's not pipe related, it's cigar related. But so I have a 22-year-old son, and we have a barber shop in a town close to ours where they also sell cigars and pipe tobacco and things like that. So you can go sit and have a cigar while you're waiting to get your haircut. So we decided to do a father and son, you know, enjoy a cigar, wait to get our haircut together, sort of thing at the barber, and you know, just kind of one of those really cool moments. So he hadn't eaten any lunch, and so I didn't realize, because I like a stronger cigar, and I bought him a good quality cigar. We sat and smoked it. He was great and everything. We're driving back to our town on the highway. And he says, "Dad, you got to pull over." And so he he ended up throwing up on the side of the road, and after that, I haven't been able to get him to try a cigar since. So maybe a pipe.
Well,
I got a story too. When I was in college, I had this guy who used to run the business and building and take care of everything. If something was missing, air conditioning, you know, not a janitor, but a thing in general. So he only smoked Toscano cigars, and he just broke those. And since I was the only one in college smoking, he was so kind sometimes. So we trade tobaccos, and one time he made me try that one, and I'm not a big fan of cigars whatsoever. So I just put it in. After like 5 puffs, I want to puke and finish the conversation, find an excuse to avoid talking to him and leaving as soon as possible. Have you have any tobacco you say, I cannot stand this tobacco after like 5 minutes?
It's funny, the 1792 story. I was telling Chuck Stanion, the editor of the magazine, since I was supposed to be reviewing it, and he had his own. He tried a bowl of it. He couldn't get out of the chair. He literally was just sitting there, and he smokes all day long, you know, and he didn't smoke again the whole day or night, or he was done for the day. And it was the morning when he tried it. It was we both had similar experiences. It took me a while to figure out it needed a microscopically sized pipe. It actually doesn't taste bad, but I had to try it in just teeny tiny pipes to be able to smoke it at all. I don't know what's in it. It's just it's a killer though.
I think the only tobacco I've ever had that I hated the taste of, and I actually couldn't smoke the pipe again, and I wished I hadn't used that pipe because I really liked it, was Grossmore. It smelled like, or it tasted like smoking perfume, and it ruined my pipe.
or your grandmother's underwear.
Or your grandmother's underwear, yes.
That's actually what happened with me too. Like when they finally, after years waiting, the Samuel Gowitz came into Europe in general. That's they only brought 3 or 4 to try, and Grossmore was the first one. And then I tried Kendall Cream, and then the Celtic Talisman, and I kind of hated Samuel Gowitz for a minute. It's like, really? All these years waiting, and this is what they have to bring? Of course, not trying for Virginia and the other ones. And since that day, I guess I cannot stand the Gowitz and Howard Lakelands. I think they ruin everything. Doesn't matter if you're smoking Latakia or a vapor. It tastes like soapy. It tastes like flowers. It's like, I cannot stand those ones whatsoever. I don't know if it happens to any of you that there is a brand or a kind of tobacco that you guys cannot.
Well, as I said, that's I found that the Kirsten fixes those. You try them in something else, it's a no-go.
But then again, there's the question about aging. Like, if you have a tobacco that, and I say this not because I know about tobacco, but because I've tried other things like tea, for example, that I'll try something that is, right out of the package, and it's like, oh, I'll let it sit, I'll go away, and whether the tobacco will mature or my taste buds will mature, and I go back to it, it's a different experience, right? So not saying that it doesn't taste like crap and there's no cure for crappy tasting tobacco, but sometimes maybe it's not the tobacco, it's just the aging.
Well, I think that everything needs to be aired. And I think the things that have some strong aromatic component, they put too much on so that it will have shelf life. If it just all went away off the shelf, it'd be the same thing as not applying it. So they put too much on with some expectation of it evaporating. So you should put all of that stuff out and let it air before you even try it.
That actually happened to me, and I'm a big fan of ELPs with sixpence. I'm not a big fan of all these alcoholic tobaccos. And I let it, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes. I just smoke it, and it was too much alcohol in the blend. I let it go for about 2 weeks, and then it was amazing. So I don't know if it happens to you guys too.
Again, they put too much on with the expectation of it just to maintain shelf life. And alcohol evaporates almost immediately after it's applied. Whatever is left is what you get. And I will say that most alcoholic beverages do not make good toppings for tobacco. They don't burn well. They do not taste good. I have experimented with untold numbers of hard liquors and different cordials and that kind of stuff, and 99% of it does not work very well on tobacco.
I don't know how they age pipe tobacco in general, but since I'm quite an avid cigar smoker, you notice that most cigar leaf is fermented for some time, or they leave it in big piles. And basically what this does is it gets rid of the ammonia in the tobacco. And you notice this with fresh cigars versus aged cigars. Like, the more aged they become, especially if you're not smoking super high quality cigars, they tend to be a bit sour. And if you leave them in a humidor for some time, they lose that sourness due to the ammonia basically going out of the cigar. Is this something that happens with pipe tobacco as well?
It is. In the case of Virginias, things with sugar in them still, they age well and they become better tasting. The chemistry changes over time, so that you get a very, very different reception from them after they've aged. I have a bunch of tins of 20 or 30-year-old Virginias, and they're in peak form. Then other things, the flavor fades over time, as I mentioned. The Latakia kind of fades. Syrian Latakia just goes away with astounding rapidity. Aging it doesn't do anything much for it. I don't know that it does much for Burley either, because Burley just by nature can be quite bitter. And when you get further down in the bowl, it doesn't seem to be very agreeable, which is one of the reasons for adding molasses to it. So it does change over time, and usually for the better. Not always, but usually for the better.
Gentlemen, we're about at that time where each week I try to get us to sort of wind down. I noticed that fellows are starting to go back to family and work and honey-do lists and whatnot for the Saturdays. So in a minute, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that are just pertinent to the group. For example, if you're one of the guys who are just joining us for the first time and you have not gone to the group page of our on Facebook, the Virtual Pipe Club, come on over and just do the whole I want to be a member of the group thing. It's a great way for us to keep in contact. A lot of times I will send out like direct messages to all of you if there's a tobacco that we've been waiting for that has been not available and suddenly it comes back in stock somewhere. I'll try to, if I catch wind of it, I'll send it out to you. And also I'm very, very excited when we get some suggestions for some of our guest speakers. I'm very grateful for those suggestions, and we'll see if we can get them. You know, William popped in and said, "Hey, I'm available if you'd like to have me come and speak," and it was the greatest thing ever because I know that I've already learned a ton, and not the least of which is that William is a very likable guy. And so that's really nice to know. So so come on over and do that. Any last questions that you want to pose to William before we wrap this up? Well, William, I want to say thank you very much for sharing your expertise and your experiences, and for teaching us a lot about, like, it's immediately obvious how much you just have at the top of your head about different tobaccos and different tobacco blends and how they're made and what some of the histories of them. And I'm super jealous of your cellar.
Most people have wine cellars. I have a tobacco cellar.
Tobacco cellar. So just one word of advice, please keep your alarm set. Otherwise, you might get a visitation. I do want to do just one thing before we go, and that is talk about the pipe swap that we got started. For those of you who don't know, I just threw this up there as a total experiment. I had no idea if it would have legs or if anybody would think I was crazy or whatever. But so we have sort of an active pipe swap going on the group page on Facebook of the Virtual Pipe Club. And you can swap in any way you want. You can swap for dollars, you can swap for tobacco, you can swap pipe for pipe. I don't care. I just think it's fun. I am sort of doing, nice pipes for crappy pipes. I've got some nice pipes, and I would love to have some old pipes that need a new life so that I could play with them and whatnot. I just got these two beauties. I don't know if this actually will focus here because I've got the other camera on. A nice Author and a Peterson from a couple of you guys, and I want to say thank you very much. I'm going to show off when they get spiffied up a little bit. And not the least of which is this beauty here, which is a tamper made by Bart the blacksmith. Twisted it all up. I know you can't see it because I'm pretty far away from the camera lens. So I can use this as a pipe tamper and also as a doorstop because I think it weighs about 3 stone.
Yeah, it weighs a lot. And I made it like that because what I noticed is that, and this is just because I'm a novice smoker, it's really hard for me to find the right amount of pressure to tamp. And I just started experimenting with different sizes of 10 square steel because I got that laying around anyway. And then I found that about this side, about 9.5 centimeters to 10, that was ideal for me to just drop it down in the tobacco and it's good, And that's why I chose this length. So I do actually make smaller ones, but this one is the one I prefer.
It's awesome. I really love it. And it's, it's beefy. So I like that kind of stuff. And then Bart asked me to bring this. This is just purely showing off. It has no purpose other than to show it. So after we had Tom on the other day, I was like, I have not invested in an L-Tang. And so I got this one. This is just their basic one. And I swear to God, it is like an engineering marvel. It is really the best smoker I've got. It burns really cleanly. I never get any occlusions in the stem of the bowl. So thank you, Bart, for asking me to bring it and to just sort of doing a yeah.
Yeah, I still need to find an excuse with my wife to buy one of these.
Yeah, you can tell her I'm pushing it. I'm recommending it. And it won't break the bank. Well, that's it for this week. I am really grateful to you guys for coming every week and doing this. We'll be posting the topic for next week's meeting. In 2 weeks, you'll see another guy in the hosting chair because I'll be gone to teach at a virtual conference. And so I won't be here in 2 weeks, the last weekend of the month. But the club will still meet, and one of the other founding members will keep it going and probably usurp my position entirely. So you'll never see me again, or I won't be allowed back in the club. Any club that would have me as a member, you know the rest, right? So that's it for this week. You guys are amazing and awesome, and I really hope that you're staying safe wherever you are. I wish you good health. William, once again, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.